Welcome to the virtual lunch. Today is Friday, July 8th, and this is virtual lunch number 592. Our guest today is Rainhart, the Chief Strategy Officer for Taft, Stettinius&Hollister, and this is part of our series on data science and the business of law with Origami. Hi, Ann. How you doing?
Good. Thanks, Ari. So great to be here. Thanks for inviting me, and so fabulous to see all of you today.
Thank you, Ari, and so great to meet you. Thank you for being our guest speaker today. I'm Paul Gudritis. I am founder and president of Origami. We are an AI-powered intelligence platform, a client intelligence platform for law firms. We use predictive analytics on firm data to help firms do a better job growing client revenues, preventing client churn, and encouraging cross-collaboration within the firm. Origami was incubated from within Axiom Consulting Partners, which is a Chicago-based consulting firm you might have heard of. I know many of my colleagues know a lot of folks at Taft. And we have a thriving professional services practice that's been around for over a decade. We do a lot of data science and data analytics work around client growth and retention, pricing, partner compensation, and also people analytics like DE&I and initiatives and so on. So very excited to be the sponsor this month and excited to have a conversation today with everyone.
I tend to be a very visual thinker in my head, and so I view things as sort of this holistic puzzle to put together. And so I see these as all key components of that puzzle in my head. And at its core, at some level, I do the same things I've always done in my entire career. I really am drawn to working with people. I've always been drawn to working with lawyers. I've seen that through my entire career, there's a ton of need in terms of helping lawyers in particular be successful and figure out what they need to do to adapt and change and be there for their clients. And we're obviously living through a really complex time. And so I've done that my entire career. These roles all fit together in my own way of putting together what I want to have experienced in my career, which is I took a deep dive in the talent world and what lawyers need and want, and what everybody who walks into a law firm needs and wants, and how do you create the right optimal environment for people, and how do you create teams, and how do you support lawyer leadership and operational leadership. And then how do I take that deep dive and spread that concept really broad through the operations of a law firm, and think about how do we run the most efficient, effective operational structure for what we're trying to do in the market. And then kind of the final piece in my head has been the strategy piece, which is almost entirely big picture at some level, helping people look out into the horizon, helping our lawyers look out into the horizon and say, where are we now and where do we want to go? How do we get there? I'm able to do that because I know what people need and want in a firm, and then I know how everything fits together. So I guess in a short answer after a long answer, Ari, is they all link together to create a full puzzle. I think like for everyone, it's all completely changed. And I like to consider myself like a really forward thinking person and always put hypotheses out there about what's going to happen. And when I reflect over the last few years and what I thought would happen with the pandemic, I've been often quite wrong in terms of how people have experienced and processed this time, and what lawyers needed, wanted, what our teams needed, wanted, what clients needed, wanted. If you were to go and listen to some of my early pieces and some of the things I wrote about back in March of 2020, I was very focused on getting people back together. I just, in my head, could not imagine the practice of law based on what I've experienced in a way that was so distanced from actually the brick and mortar of a law firm. And I've had to kind of go through a whole metamorphosis in my head of reconciling what I really think people need and want and what this moment is really requiring. With the caveat, I would say that my career has benefited incredibly from having amazing flexibility and not having to be in the office all of the time. And so I've had to change my thinking about that a bit. So to answer your question, Jamie, we really had to pivot and create a whole new way of working and communicating and helping our lawyers and our teams do that. At my core, I still believe that people need human connection and that we are still not doing enough to create opportunities where people come together, and that we're thoughtful about when people are in the same room together, what do we do and how do we leverage technology to be efficient and effective. I do not believe that we are all fine in our basements by ourselves with our headphones on every day.
So, Anne, a bunch of what you were talking about, I think really like thematically resonates with me and my colleagues, that especially I think your comment about kind of you need to look at the holistic connection between talent and between operations when you think about driving growth in firms. And, we always say that, sort of growth in law firms depends on people intelligence and revenue intelligence, right? And in particular, in a world where we've gone remote, as you guys were talking about, so much of work is virtual and digital, and there's so much data that captures kind of those interactions. So my question for you is, in your current role, how are you at your firm thinking about leveraging data to help support growth in general, whether it's growth in the client sense and revenue sense or growth of people and personnel?
Yeah, great question. And all of you, as I listen to your bios and the work that you do, obviously have data often front and center in all that you're doing, and think about this in perhaps a different way than I have come to utilizing data. Maybe backing up a little bit just in my own philosophy and what I've experienced in law firms, and then we can talk about how we're using data and where I think we should be using data versus where we're not using data. In undergrad, I was a sociology major, and so I was always drawn through social science to facts and numbers that help explain why people and systems do things. And so I have always sought data to pull back the layer on what is that. I see what's happening, but I need to understand it through numbers. And I have helped lawyers throughout my career, depending on what role I was in, and that has shifted very depending on that role, the kind of data that we needed to help us both get a lay of the land of what is our current state, and then what do we need to do to change whatever it is we're trying to change. Maybe it's because we need to provide a new service to a client. Maybe it's we need to understand somebody's particular business better. Maybe we need to understand why an associate isn't getting the work he or she needs. Maybe we need to understand how much we're spending on coffee or lunch, whatever it is, we need to look at numbers. Here's the thing, though, that I would say about working with lawyers and helping law firms in particular adapt in the marketplace is that the lawyer personality, and I'm sure you all are aware of Dr. Larry Richard and his great work, and I've spent a lot of time with Larry over the course of my career. And you can either choose to work with the lawyer personality or against the lawyer personality. And the times where I have tried to bring and start with data, particularly in a way that might be highlighting something that's not where it should be. So we aren't driving the revenue we need, or somebody's practice isn't where it needs to be, or we have a gap in our experience, or something is of really high cost and we shouldn't be spending time there. My experience is we've had just as many of our more senior lawyers who used to always be in the office are now not there hardly at all. And their paradigm of all of this thinking has also shifted. So I am not hearing the drumbeat of everybody needs to get back in the way we did 2 years ago. I am seeing and experiencing that when people are coming in and we're being purposeful about who is in and on what days and what we're trying to do and making that a good thing, good things come from that. The last few years have been very humbling to me, and I think not underestimating how much we need each other and to share ideas and to cultivate spaces like this. I think we have a lot more ability to shape things than we sometimes give ourselves credit for. And so I leave everybody with like a sense of hope in that I think we can make profound change. And already listening to this conversation today, I have my new hypothesis. Not everybody has to be the same in where we're headed. But the key to leadership is that you know what you're trying to do.
And Rainhart, everybody. Thanks so much to you.
Great.
Thanks to our friends at Origami as part of this series on data science and the business of law. Wonderful discussion. I hope everyone has a great weekend.